Okay, let's begin. Well, welcome everybody to Assurance 101, Unlocking the Value of Sustainability Assurance. Thanks for joining us. Um, we can go to the next slide here. First, I wanted to introduce myself and 3R. Um, I'm Josh Knupp. I'm a senior manager at 3R. I specifically oversee our EcoVadis service line, so supporting companies with their submissions and gap assessments and everything in between. So 3R at large is a sustainability consulting firm founded in 2015. So we are a full service sustainability solutions provider, really focused on creating business value. So you'll see in the middle of the slide there some of the service areas that we focus on. So sustainability management systems, you could think of this largely as sustainability strategy, planning, that type of thing. We also have a group that focuses on climate and greenhouse gas inventory, decarbonization, built environment team. So these are very focused on how do we decarbonize buildings in particular, as well as waste and other considerations about physical footprint. And then assurance. So the topic for today will be having Gina, who's sharing this stage with me here, discussing. So a couple of the notes about 3R. We have many certifications, but a couple to point out here. We are a strategic training partner with EcoVadis, also a women-owned business, UN Global Compact. You can see the list of certifications there at the bottom. Okay, so before we go yes, so I wanted to mention this is the 4th webinar series. We're calling this bonus one. We will be doing another webinar next month, specifically talking about integrating EcoVadis into your sustainability reporting. So I know a lot of companies are starting to do the planning for their 2024 reports and wanted to provide some information and details about how you can start thinking about utilizing your report to help your EcoVadis submission from a scoring perspective and also transparency. So you see a QR code there on the right. If you're interested in joining our mailing list, you get information about our newsletters, upcoming webinars, all of that. So now I do want to invite Preston to the stage, who will be working in the background a little bit today. Preston, if you want to introduce yourself and talk about your role.
Yeah, hi, I'm Preston. I'm a sustainability consultant at 3R, but today I will be supporting behind the scenes. The chat function is turned off for this webinar, so we ask that you please use the Q&A function at the top of your screen. Those questions will be filtered out and asked in the end of the call, unless we feel like it's very pertinent to the conversation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out to all registered attendees, and it'll also be posted on the EcoVadis website. If for any reason we don't get to your question, please contact us at our info@3rsustainability.com email, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Preston. All right, so I would like to introduce our featured panelist today, Gina McElraith, who is an associate director at SAS, Sustainability Assurance Services. So Gina, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Technically where I am, I'm Gina McElraith. I lead our Sustainability Assurance Services division. We're a partner of 3R, and I have a long history and career in assurance, in auditing, in ISO certifications and sustainable operations. I'm very excited to combine my sustainability professional background with my assurance and auditing background to serve the needs of this world, which I will say is a little bit wild and crazy right now. Acknowledge that right off the top. The reason why we're starting at 101 is everybody is really spending a lot of time figuring out what's going on in this space, and we're excited to take you and help you on that journey. So with that, I'll take over from here, Josh. Thanks. So talking a little bit about SaaS, Sustainability Assurance Services, we definitely like to refer to ourselves as SaaS. And we are a independent division of 3R LLC. We work to provide tailor-made sustainability assurance services, both for organizations, which is, I believe, probably the most of you in this webinar today, but we also work with certification bodies and provide third-party verification and additional resources and assistance to certification bodies. So oftentimes when you are submitting to another lead or GRESB, we'll be working in the background in that sense too. So we have a deep understanding of a variety of different service standards and assurance requirements. We are ANAB accredited to ISO 17020. This is a third-party verification and assurance that definitely is important to us, and that we can guarantee that our systems and processes in place confirm that we are meeting the requirements of the highest standard in assurance and verification. And finally, we are a 1000 licensed provider, and I'll talk a little bit more about that standard later. So the key takeaways for today, the main points is really to understand the basics. We'll talk about the definitions, where we start, what are the foundational understanding of information that's necessary to move through this process. Then we will discover how assurance can improve your sustainability assessment results, and how the assurance process and having a third party review your process and verify the results makes a difference, more than just checking a box. We'll also demonstrate how the value of the value of sustainability data and report assurance, and that how you can not only get credit for it in assessments, but also how the assessment can help you internally. And then finally, we'll walk you through an assurance audit experience. Many people hear the word audit and panic. I understand exactly why that happens. Being ISO certified means that we've been through audits ourselves. So we really want you to understand how this audit, what is similar and what is different from maybe some of the other experiences you've had in this area. Some of the key use cases for assurance, and there is multiple, but the ones that we see currently and are driving the industry is, first of all, greenhouse gas inventories. That is, the verification of inventories is prime and is one of the key areas that people are starting with when they're looking to get third-party assurance. That's what a lot of organizations have already developed. But you can also get any sustainability data assured. We say non-financial because oftentimes you hear assurance, and it will include the financial information, but it does apply to more than financial. Water, waste, safety, any of those items, any non-financial data that you're tracking can be verified and assured through this process. And then finally, we assure sustainability reports. So more than just looking at the data, but actually looking at the full process and third-party verification and assurance of the whole report that you're putting out. What's really driving the impact of assurance right now? The key one immediately in front of us is, regulatory compliance, CSRD coming out of the EU, and all of the other alphabets that go with that initiative those requirements are coming, rolling out to different entities who operate in the EU. We also have requirements coming out of California with SB 219 that it was just finalized recently, and more will be coming out requiring assurance with that. But then also we have stakeholder requirements, either from an investor or a customer is most often where this information comes from, or sometimes it's board of directors, where some sort of external stakeholder is expecting or looking for third-party verification of your information. The next one is any of the disclosures, ratings, and sustainability assessments that you are submitting to. Specifically for EcoVadis, your score can and does improve with a third-party verification of not only your greenhouse gas emissions or other data, but you also can improve your score with a third-party verification of your full report that's being submitted. And then finally, strategic certainty, the value of having a third party who understands what you're doing, but comes at it from a very process-oriented perspective and very independent perspective to help you ensure that the work that you're putting out there is key and as accurate as possible. Stop right here to check and see, Preston, have any questions or anything come in yet? It's perfectly okay. If not, we can take them later, but wanted to just double check.
No questions yet.
All right, we'll keep rolling then. So getting into the basics of assurance. We'll start with the definitions, and I find myself already using a variety of different words that mean somewhat the same, but are used interchangeably, but do have some different meanings and are applicable when you're looking to go through the process. So first is validation. I'm going to use the example of SBTI targets. Validation is really looking at a forward-looking process in that you're validating a future target that has been set. The next word you'll hear is verification. Validation, verification. Validation is forward-looking. Verification is looking back. So verification is confirming data that has been calculated, collected, the activity that has happened. So we're verifying historic information. And then finally, if I can get my cursor in the right spot, maybe. There we go, apologies. Then you have assurance. So assurance is the final step it's a letter or report. It's issuing an opinion on the degree of confidence of the data and the reporting. So you complete a verification or validation process, and then assurance is that final result of the process, and getting into the process itself and the overall effectiveness of everything that's happened and been reported. Now, there's a variety and a long list of assurance standards that can be utilized in this. The ones I've listed here, the ones that you most commonly will hear or be asked about. AA1000 is a principle-based standard. It really looks at the holistic approach to how not only data was collected, ensuring that you have stakeholder engagement, determining the impact, and also the effectiveness and the response to what the data or the information is telling you. That is one option for assurance. The other option or standard that you'll often hear or see is an ISAE 3000, which is often accompanied by ISA 3410. That is the standard that is typically used by financial auditors who are auditing non-financial information. And then finally, coming soon is ISSA 5000, which is a new standard that's being developed that is for assurance of sustainability data. It is developed from the financial sector by the same organization that created the ISAE standards, but this one is specifically to meet the needs that are coming up related to assuring sustainability data. And then finally, one other that you'll often hear is 17029, and also ISO 14065 or 14064-3. ISO 17029 is for the process related to verification and validation, and 14065 is related to your greenhouse gas emissions. So you don't have to know all this information. Your auditor should. The organization that you're working with, but it is important to know or understand that there are different options, and each organization may use a little different one, and each regulation may require. So it's important to know or to look for those. And then two other pieces to assurance, or the other side of this is levels. So one of the things you are seeing in the regulations in particular is limited versus reasonable. And we'll start with limited. Limited is a review of the processes and calculations, and it's really considered a negative opinion. So nothing looks wrong. It's also often completed offsite. It doesn't have to be, but it can be completed virtually. And it really is looking to see that I, as an auditor, look through the process and say, looking at everything that they've done using the assurance standards that I have, nothing looks wrong. There's no reason to believe that there's anything wrong here. On the other side of that, or the next step, is reasonable assurance. And this one is much more rigorous. It is an actual examination of the processes and calculations. You'll often have your auditor come on site, because I'm going to go through and I'm going to, look at the process. Where is the data coming in? Where is the waste coming out? Where is the water? Where, what is the whole process that's happening? I'm going to look at multiple steps, verify and check all the calculations. And then I'm also going to, at the end, be able to issue an opinion that the data is right. So it is a positive opinion. And that in this case, I am saying that yes, the information is correct and accurate. As you can tell, there's a significant difference in those. So there's, a significant difference in resources and costs specifically, and both have very important and are valuable and accepted depending on what you're looking at. So that, assuming no other questions on that, we can move to the next section.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Gina. I think that really kind of level sets for the audience to get the basics down, and a lot of great information there. So I want to transition a little bit in this webinar to really talking about the experience that a client or a company would go through when they're going through assurance. So my first question for you is to look at the typical process for a sustainability assurance audit. And if you could maybe highlight a few of the steps that a company would expect to see, say using AA1000 standard as an example, what could they expect?
Yeah, so your typical process should be the same at a very high level, no matter what standard you're looking at. Each one has a process of starting off with what's called an engagement agreement, sometimes a fee proposal. Your auditor will request information to understand the scope of your of what you're looking for. Most of the questions are informing all of those terms and basics that I just mentioned, and that as an auditor, I need to ensure that you're getting the right product, and the scope of what I need to do is really based on those answers. I will tell you also that the answer of I don't know is perfectly okay. You can work with your provider to figure out what that answer is. If you know, great. If you don't, then your provider will help you figure that piece out. The next step then, once you've agreed on, the scope, ensure that everything is what you need, then you'll provide evidence. It really does depend on, if it's a sustainability report, you're going to provide your report. You're going to provide your greenhouse gas inventory. You're going to provide your data, your your auditor will work with you and let you know what that information is. But it starts off with providing some basic information and starting process. And then your auditor will then create a verification plan. Using that information, it really is then like, okay, we see what we have now. How are we going to ensure that we meet the requirements of those standards and can meet a limited versus reasonable point? And so in that process, we're going to go off often and we're going to, take your information, we're going to interview, work with you. We'll use, whatever's available. It can be publicly available. We'll often, do interviews. But it's not so much like, if you've been through an ISO audit or some of those where, it's a significant amount of information and you've got your auditor on site for 3 days and I need to set my whole calendar aside. That's not what this process typically looks like. It really is provide the information, the auditor goes off, does their work, and then they'll come back. And sometimes there's questions, and we all understand sustainability data and that, there's a lot of assumptions and things we have to work on and find out later that, the information that I had here is a little bit different. So there could be a lot of back and forth depending on, how far you are along in the process. And then your auditor is going to come back and have some follow-up. If there are some concerns with the process, then you might have some corrective actions that are requested for you to make some updates before an opinion can be issued or that could impact the opinion. And then finally, you will receive that final opinion assurance letter, whether you've met the criteria, in which case you'll get a letter that says within limited or reasonable, or sometimes it's qualified. A portion passed, a portion didn't pass. So there's a few options there, but it really is, a one-time engagement, and it starts and stops. It typically should take, anywhere from, a week or two, depending on how much is back and forth, but it doesn't generally take that long once the process starts.
And how does this differ from working with you and your team compared to working with a large accounting firm? Is the process similar? What are some of the benefits of maybe working with you compared to a bigger firm?
Yeah, so there's definitely different use cases for each of the options that we're talking about. So if you are a very large publicly traded company that has a firm that you have a relationship with, and they have sustainability professionals and can demonstrate that they provide the full width of breadth of information that's there. I think that is definitely a good practice and a good applicable piece to this. If you're not in that, or if you really are looking for a non-financial review, and or something that is a bit lower cost to entry, then working with a sustainability provider who is looking specifically at your sustainability information. We have an understanding of the processes. So a financial auditor has a long history of and very well established history of auditing dollars and cents, which is a single unit that we're all very familiar with. We all know the difference between $1, $10, and $100. What is key, though, is understanding, and your provider to know the difference between 1 metric ton of CO2 and 1,000 metric tons of CO2, and to know the nuances and to understand where you need to be able to say, yes, I know you can do better and get better data, or I know that that's not applicable. I had an example of someone I was talking with recently, and they had undergone a greenhouse gas inventory at a reasonable level. It was a very large organization, and they had used their financial auditing firm who was already there doing the financials. We'll do our greenhouse gas inventory too. And that specific auditor determined that there were emissions related with the fire extinguishers, and required the company to go through and determine the emissions related with the fire extinguishers, which anyone who's done a greenhouse gas inventory understands that that is pretty de minimis and does not have an impact on the result. So it really is key to have, you know, somebody who has a good understanding of this information. So I think that's very important. I'm not, you know, there's the right answer for everyone, but I think what is key to understand is there's multiple ways you can go about this process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think expanding on that a little bit and like the gaps and the corrective actions, what are some of the, like, using the fire extinguisher example, maybe that's not a corrective action that you would focus on necessarily. What are some examples of areas of improvement that you would call out and that you would expect or could see a company needing to address?
Yeah, oftentimes it is related to documentation, depending on the, you know, the processes or what you're getting audited or assured. It really is related to documentation. If there is a requirement, you know, for tracking, specifically with CSRD, there is some specific requirements around being able to know who input information and be able to track, you know, who's touched it, who's changed it, all the different, you know, the whole path in between. And so being able to demonstrate, and in some cases you're required to have documentation in that case. So understanding your process, and it doesn't mean your process has to be sophisticated. In some cases, if you're, you know, not doing CSRD, or if, you know, you're looking for a greenhouse gas inventory, where I've got my spreadsheet, I've got an Excel document, I know who brought this information in. I can show you the utility bill it came from, or I can show you, you know, my waste calculations. I can show you the exact process. You can talk to the people who did it. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated process, but definitely knowing your process from beginning to end. So the other place of gaps is understanding, you know, if you're using the greenhouse gas protocol, which is what is most commonly used for as the standard to work for greenhouse gas inventories, it is, you know, knowing that you often see where the wrong information or the wrong interpretation of the protocol was used. From a sustainability report standpoint, I will say that, you know, and specifically if you're doing it towards GRI, you know, whether you're saying in accordance or in reference to, making sure you've got the right information there. And then finally, related to the stakeholder engagement, ensuring that companies aren't just, you know, I can see sometimes early in your process, the leadership team will say, this is what you're doing. And you go about and do that. And in an assurance standard, particularly if you're using AA 1000, it really does look at the holistic approach. So how are you, you know, bringing in information from a variety of areas? None of these, I would say, the key to understand this is that everybody has gaps. Nobody is perfect, and that, you know, in most cases, or, you know, if you've, you know, you do your very best, and then, you know, your auditor knows the questions to ask and can understand, you know, they can't consult. I think one thing that is also really important is to know that your auditor cannot consult you. So as an auditor, I can say you don't meet the requirement, but I can't tell you how to meet the requirement. So that is important. And as you know, sometimes as an auditor that can get frustrating, but just know that your auditor is doing that for a reason. It's really key to have that independence to being able to do the work. It is different. It's third party and it's independent. So that is key.
I think the next area I wanted to talk about is, say a company is going through this process for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any prep work specifically to this process that you would recommend pursuing before going through the assurance process? Is there anything specific you call out there?
Giggle a little bit because oftentimes I will say that someone will see a requirement and says, I need to get assurance. And so they'll come and say, I need assurance. And the first thing I'll ask is, well, you know, have you done, again, use greenhouse gas inventories as an example. I'm like, well, have you completed your greenhouse gas inventory? They're like, not yet. Okay, you have to complete the inventory first, and then we can assure it. So that's kind of um, a bit of a very light
Right.
light
Yeah.
term, but I think it is important to make sure, if you're getting, make sure you've completed the process. So you've got the data, you've got, your calculations, you've done it to the best of your ability, the best you understand. And in preparation, it is definitely like, you've done so much work to get to where you are. So don't discount the importance of all of that work. So I think, oftentimes people will say, oh, here's my report. But the report is just the result. And there really is a lot that has gone in. So being able to, you know, understand or know where, a lot of the processes that went together, your materiality process that you went through, I'm going to ask for that if it's, a GRI report, or, some of those other steps that come along the way. So be thinking about and understand that it's not just this last piece, but you're getting credit, and you're getting your whole process is often getting reviewed from start to finish. So in preparation, it's just understanding, asking what's needed, and don't be afraid to, share information or think, oh, well, we did this. Does this work? Yes. Yes or no. No, that's not what I'm looking for, but that'll help me as an auditor. Oh, not
Right.
that, but what about this? So there is, just be thinking about, potentially a broader impact or broader perspective there.
Right. I think that makes it a little bit less scary too, right?
Mhm.
Like you're going
Yeah.
through the process. You've already done the greenhouse gas inventory. You've already done the
Mhm.
report. You've done the work, and now
Mhm.
it's bringing in someone to give you that level of confidence that you
Absolutely.
did it the right way. You followed the
Mhm.
standards that you were
Mhm.
looking to follow. So I think that that puts some people at ease when they hear that, is that there
I hope
isn't.
so.
Yeah,
Yes.
you've done the work already, and you can feel like proud in that you've done that. Now it's just doing this last part to
Mhm.
really give that level of validation. So I want to ask
And
one more.
sorry,
Okay, yeah, please.
I was gonna add that too. I'll also help tell you that with that said, information that's being put out there is being scrutinized. And
Mhm.
you do want to ensure, a lot of what I'm looking at, or what we're looking at, is, you don't want to put something out there that, you know, you're not confident in too. So
Right.
be thinking about having that, greenwashing is very, out there. We don't want to go through green hushing where we're not talking about all the good work that we're doing, but having that extra set of eyes, and under eyes that are following a clear process, to review it
Mhm.
is very important.
That adds the credibility of your organization too, with
Hmm.
investors, with customers, regulators, all the different stakeholders. Having that, yeah, just increases the credibility.
Hmm.
So I want to ask one more question. Again, kind of role playing is if this is a company that's going through this process for the first time and starting to look for a provider.
Hmm.
Um, what is some of the top criteria that they should be looking for?
I think the first thing is looking for some sort of certification. Is what's, your auditor who you're reaching out to is going to ask you questions, but you're obviously asking them. So if there's some sort of certification standard, that they have achieved, whether you are an AA 1000 licensed practitioner, ISO certification, um, anything else related to, the credibility of the organization. You also want to confirm and establish that they're impartial and independent. Um, at Sustainability Assurance Services, we have, gone the extra step to, develop and create a individual entity, that has its own, standalone information, that we operate independently of the consulting business. Every organization and every standard has a different requirement, but I think that is really key. And I always appreciate when I'm talking to a finance person in particular, when they're asking about assurance, that's usually their first question. So I think that is really important. And then ensuring that there's competent professionals that are creating or doing your inventory or your assurance, and being able to confirm that they are knowledgeable in the area of expertise that we're looking to be worked on. And then, definitely looking to see what are, some of the other requirements that you have to go through, when you're asking questions, making sure that the service that your auditor is providing does meet the requirements that you have to. As I said, there are, for example, with EcoVadis, it does not specify if there is, if it's to a certain standard, or that, what necessarily needs to be reviewed or how it needs to be reviewed. It just says third party, independent, assurance or verification. Whereas if you're doing compliance, or if you have a specific requirement, then I think, it's making sure that what your auditor is providing will meet, either the one thing you're looking at, or maybe multiple options that you're looking at. So make sure you're asking those questions.
Okay. That's really great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think the audience has probably heard enough of my questions. So I do want to bring Preston back on here, see if there's any questions from the audience.
Yeah, we had a couple. You mentioned, Gina, that like, of course, the auditor can't consult, but people were asking like, can you help with anything? And I was thinking about one of our clients that had multiple phases. Could you talk a little bit about the phased approach to auditing that could be helpful for people going first time?
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely a phased approach, or, an auditor can do a gap assessment, or what we'll often look at if we've got, a client who's like, I think I did it right, but, I did it myself. And, I really want to go through the process, but I don't want to have to, get to the end and say, no, you did it wrong. So we'll do a stage 1 and a stage 2, where we'll go through in a stage 1, and maybe, let's look at some of those areas right off where you're, even before you like publish your report, or, have a deadline, or everything's done, specifically thinking about like materiality in this case, where your materiality has been completed, your report's coming out. We can always go and look at some of those first processes and say, oh yeah, that looks really good. Or, oftentimes I'll look and say, you only say board of directors there. Did you really just ask your board of directors? They're like, oh no, we didn't. Like, we asked a lot of people. Well, then let's, then maybe you could reflect that in, in your matrix that you're talking about. So there's definitely, the report doesn't have to be complete before you actually want to bring your auditor in before you do your final, before you do your final publish, because oftentimes there's, things with it that can be adjusted, or need to be adjusted in those final drafts, or even earlier in the process. But if we go through that first step and you're like, yeah, you're right, there was some gaps here, you're probably not going to make it. That doesn't mean, then we're like, yep, that's great. Let's go back next year. Let's work on it again. But that's definitely what can happen. So it isn't, taking in the full cost, which really is in reality the important, can be a big driver of this. So.
Yeah. Yeah, related, someone asked about cost. I'm going to say it varies a lot. I don't know if there's anything you want to share, but
yeah, I will say it varies a lot. So that is why, asking the multitude of questions, whether it's the number of sites, the scope of it is key to this. I will also, if there's regulatory requirements or not, if it's limited versus reasonable. I will tell you that I was working with one of my consulting clients, and because we had consulted, we could not verify their emissions, and so we were working, helping them go out and get some quotes, and there was magnitude differences in the cost. So there definitely is a wide variety providing the exact same service. And as I said, there's a lot in this sustainability assurance that has been done for a long time, and a lot that is new, and a lot of it from the auditor side is related to risk, and the risk that we need to look at from the perspective of how much work do we have to do if you have a very complex system, international, regulatory. There's a lot of steps there. There's a lot of risk on my side that I need to be able to review to issue an accurate opinion, and a very opinion that I can stand up to. Then I definitely am going to, require a lot more work than, being able to use some of the other standards or requirements where I can still meet the same intent, but maybe a bit less rigorous. So there really are a lot of variables. But
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've been on a few calls with you when you're talking to initial clients, and we always kind of just meet people where they're at. So if anyone's ever feeling intimidated by the process, definitely reach out. We'd be happy to kind of talk through what makes sense for your organization. Those are the two questions from the audience. Unless, Josh, did you have another? Oh, maybe a new one.
No, that's all. I just wanted to do a little time check here. We have a couple minutes, so if there is one final question, I think we can get that in. But if not, we can do some closing statements.
Someone asked about assurance for cocoa certifications in West Africa. Perhaps, depending on the certification body, we'd be able to help.
Yeah, I have many questions. so I think it really, in West Africa cocoa certification, it would depend on the certification, the requirements of the certification of who's each standard, has a different requirement related to it of who can provide the certification. There, unfortunately or fortunately, just like everything else in sustainability, the answer is it depends. But I would love to ask all of my questions and help you figure out what the appropriate response would be to that.
Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great follow-up conversation.
I was going to say cocoa, I'm in. I have expertise in at least a portion of that supply chain.
Well, this is really fantastic. Great. Thanks, Preston. This is really fantastic. Thank you, Gina, for all of your insights and going through all the basics and talking about what this looks like from a company experience perspective. I think that's really valuable to share with the group, and hopefully maybe ease some concerns on how scary this process can be, or doesn't need to be, I should say.
Doesn't need to be, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, and if there's any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us. If there's any specifics that we can help with, please again reach out. But otherwise, I would thanks for your time and hope you can join us next month for our next webinar.